Philippians Chapter 1, Through the Bible, Part 2. Paul's tender feeling for the Philippians. I thank my God upon every remembrance of you. Philippians 1 verse 3. He begins the body of his letter in this very lovely manner, which reveals the sweet relationship between Paul and the Philippian believers. That is the way it ought to be today among believers, especially between pastor and congregation. The literal translation would be, all my remembrance of you causes me to thank God. Every time anybody would mention Philippi, Paul would just thank God for the believers there. That is something really quite wonderful. Every now and then, I get a letter from some organization that wants me to do something for them. That is perfectly legitimate for them to make such a request, but they begin the letter with, I thank my God upon every remembrance of you. Sometimes I'm not so sure they really feel that way about me, but they are preparing me for the request that is coming. But how wonderful it would be to have a church like the Philippian church. And how wonderful to be the kind of person about which it can be said, all my remembrance of you causes me to thank God. If Paul hadn't said anything else about his relationship to this church, this would have been enough to reveal how special it was. You can check the other epistles. He didn't say this to the other churches, certainly not about the Galatians or the Corinthians. Always in every prayer of mine for you all, making request with joy. Philippians 1 verse 4. Always, not just sometimes. Always in every prayer Paul remembered the Philippian believers. The phrase for you all makes it very clear that Paul was speaking to all the saints that were in that church, the corporate body in the local church. When we reach the final chapter of this epistle, we will find that there was a little ripple of discord between two women in the Philippian church, Syntyche and Euodias. So Paul at the very beginning was careful to include all the saints in order that one group couldn't say to the other, he is writing to us and not to you. Making request with joy. Bengel said that the sum of this epistle is, I rejoice, rejoice ye. We realize what a remarkable expression this is when we consider where Paul was when he wrote. He was over in Rome in prison. He probably was not in the Mamertine prison at this time, but he was in a place equally as disagreeable. Although the word joy appears 19 times in this epistle, I have never felt that it should be called the joy epistle. If we are going to pick out the word that occurs more than any other word, we must take the name of Jesus Christ. His name appears over 40 times in this epistle. He is the center of the epistle. He is the one who is the very source of joy. Therefore, the emphasis should be put upon him rather than upon the joy. As we shall see, the philosophy of Christian living has to do with him. The pattern has to do with him. The price of Christian living has to do with him, and the power has to do with him. Actually, it is a personal relationship with Christ that brings joy to a believer's life. We try to produce joy in the church by external means. We have a program and tell folks, come and you will enjoy it. We have a banquet, people enjoy a banquet, so we have joy, we say. Actually, joy does not depend upon outward circumstances. Real joy depends upon the inward condition of the individual. It depends on the proper attitude toward life. If you are complaining and whining about your lot in life, certainly you will not be experiencing joy. You may be able to go to a church banquet and have a little fun, but that will not be joy. When you and I get to the place where we find ourselves in the center of the will of God and know we are in His will, regardless of our circumstances, then there will be joy in our lives. Paul said, always in every prayer of mine for you all, making request with joy. The time of prayer was not an ordeal for Paul. He didn't say, oh, I've got to go through the ordeal of praying for those folk again. No, he said, as I am here in jail, it is a lot of fun to pray for you Philippians. It brings joy to my heart. Now, having told them he thanked God for them, he gives a reason. for your fellowship in the gospel from the first day until now. Philippians 1 verse 5. For your fellowship in the gospel. Now we have come to a very important word in this epistle. We do not want to pass over this word fellowship. This word is used widely in the church and outside the church. I don't think that most people really know what the word means, and therefore they don't use it properly. Years ago, I was invited down to Huntington Beach about once a year to give a message at a Rotary Club luncheon. A Christian doctor was chairman of the program committee down there, and he would invite me to come at Christmas time or Easter time and give them the gospel, both barrels, which is what I always tried to do. Over the speaker's table, they had a slogan: food, fun, fellowship. Those three things belonged to the early church, and I didn't feel that the Rotary Club should have bragged about having any one of the three. For food, there would be embalmed chicken with peas as hard as bullets. For fun, they had corny jokes. The fellowship consisted of patting someone on the back and saying, "Hello, Bill. How's business?" Now, that is not fellowship in the biblical sense of the word. The Greek word is koinonia, and it means that which believers can share of the things of Christ. There are three elements that must enter into it: spiritual communication, sympathetic cooperation, and sweet communion. 1. Spiritual communication is sharing the things of Christ. This would be sharing the great truths concerning Christ. 2. Sympathetic cooperation means working together for Christ. That is why, when Paul used the word fellowship, he could be talking about Bible reading or Bible study together or prayer or celebrating the Lord's Supper or taking up an offering. Paul called all of these koinonia, fellowship. The result would be 3. Sweet communion. It makes us partners with Christ. This is true koinonia. Paul wrote that this church was having fellowship with him. He had communicated to them the gospel. They had shared with Paul in a sympathetic cooperation. They had sent a gift to him and had ministered to his physical needs again and again. Then when they were together, they had sweet communion. From the first day until now, Paul had enjoyed wonderful fellowship with them from the first day. That day he had met Lydia and her group praying by the riverside.